Thank you for watching our second weekly webinar about bullying awareness. If this is the first time you're tuning in, my name is Scott Swishow. I'm going to be your presenter today. I'm the owner and operator of Revolution Self-Defense and Revolution Modern Martial Arts in Clayton, North Carolina. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to be able to open a dialogue and provide resources to parents and community leaders so that we as a community can get together and start curtailing this bullying behavior. So our topic for today is to discuss who is at risk of being involved in bullying incidents, the warning signs, and the possible negative outcomes for those who are involved. We're not going to be just covering those who are at risk of being the targets, but also those who are at risk of being the one who's engaging in the bullying behavior. Now, before we get into who are the people who are most at risk of being targets of bullying behavior, we need to acknowledge that geographically speaking, bullying can happen almost anywhere. There's not one single factor that can be identified as the key trait that targets of bullying share. However, geography can have a bigger role to play for certain groups such as the LGBT community, kids with disabilities, and etc. But we have to realize that bullying can happen at school, the playground, at home, anywhere that people congregate. Bullying kind of behaviors can present themselves. So let's talk about the things that make someone a risk for being a target for bullying, some of the factors, if you will. One of the most obvious factors that puts kids at risk is if they're perceived as different than their peers. Last week we talked about and identified that bullying behavior stems from a perceived power imbalance between the one who's engaging in the behavior and their intended target. So being seen as physically inferior, coming from a less economically privileged background, being less popular, those types of things, they may be the factors that cause the perceived power imbalance. In addition, those who are less able or less willing to defend themselves are at increased risk of being a target. As we discussed again last week during our cyberbullying segment, although the people who are engaging in the behavior of bullying, they may be more apt to do so if the risk of the negative consequences is diminished. And by picking a target who's not going to defend themselves or is less willing to defend themselves, it's going to be those types of situations where their consequences are diminished, so that may put the actual target at more risk. And also those who are at risk a lot of times are the kids who already have self-esteem issues and do not get along well with others at school. And I think that a lot of these factors play off of one another. Those who are perceived as different may have been bullied in the past or may also perceive themselves as inferior. In turn, they're not going to have a high self-esteem or the confidence to make many friends, which then in turn makes them a more likely target of bullying behavior. And this can truly be a vicious cycle. We also want to discuss the factors that make a child more likely to engage in bullying behavior. And these types of factors are things like kids who have the dominant type of personality and they're overly concerned about their popularity. Maybe they think that by making other groups seem less valued, that it raises their standing. And if their bullying behavior attracts bystanders and an audience, they may see this increased attention as a boost to their social standing. So with that, you also have the loner type, quote-unquote loner type, who may engage in the bullying behavior due to peer pressure from a group that they want to be a part of. So those are the types of things that are key factors. In addition, other risk factors are being easily frustrated and overly aggressive, negative towards people in general. They view positively they view violence. They may have a peer group that includes other people who engage in bullying behavior, and most of the time they're less likely to have a lot of parental involvement in the things that they do for school and outside of school. Like we said about the factors for being a target, a lot of these factors are related. If you're easily frustrated and negative to others, you may lash out at those who are, quote, weaker than you. If your friends are engaging in bullying behavior, you're going to also possibly engage in that behavior because you want to fit in, or that behavior is what attracted you to that group in the first place. And if your parents are just phoning it in and not showing you how to treat other people, or worse, they're setting a bad example to begin with by engaging in bullying behavior as well, you're going to be more likely to engage in the bullying behavior that offers an immediate reward to your self-esteem. So let's cover some of the warning signs that a child may be involved in bullying incidents. The kids who are targets of bullying behavior may have a number of unexplained or implausible injuries. A black eye on Tuesday from an accidental elbow during gym class basketball, followed by a fat lip from falling off the skateboard on Wednesday, should be a red flag. In addition, there are a rash of missing or destroyed personal items. The child may be having their belongings taken or ruined by the kids who are engaging in the bullying behavior against them. Behaviors that show that they are avoiding social situations, including school, is also a warning. Obviously, bullying behavior requires one to be in the presence of others, and feigning illness may be the child's attempt at avoiding being around those that have been targeting them. Self-destructive behavior, thoughts, and declining grades are also all warnings. The self-destructive behavior could be caused by a drop in self-esteem due to bullying behavior, and the declining grades can be a symptom of avoiding school, as discussed previously, or a loss of focus during class time just due to the stress of the bullying that's been happening. Now, the kids who are engaging in the bullying behavior may show the following warnings. Fighting often, either verbally or physically. As stated before, having friends who are identified as engaging in bullying behavior is a warning due to the fact that birds of a feather do tend to flock together. Being formally disciplined in school often is a sign that the child is engaging in a lot of negative behavior. Those who engage in bullying behavior often blame others for their problems, and they take no responsibility for their own actions. And finally, being overly competitive and too concerned about their reputation is also a warning sign that this child is at risk for engaging in bullying behavior. Last week, we mentioned that kids who are involved in bullying incidents are at higher risk of having negative outcomes. And this isn't just confined to the targets, but it also has implications for those who are engaging in the behavior and the bystanders. The targets are at risk of having a depressed mood and all the symptoms that come with it. A lack of interest in things they once enjoyed, sadness, malaise, lack of social interaction, and other quality of life concerns. And the bad thing is that these can last well beyond the bullying incident and even into adulthood. These kids will also be at risk for having more health complaints and poor grades, which have obvious negative effects to their future. The kids who are engaging in the behavior, they're at risk of abusing drugs and alcohol in adolescence and beyond. They're at risk for being involved in more fights and more criminality. Sexual activity may happen at an earlier age than for those who don't engage in bullying. And all these may be related to the fact that the bullying behavior is an attempt to fit in or improve social standing. So other high-risk behaviors that are perceived to get one closer to being more popular or things like that could also increase. Sadly, those who engage in the bullying are also at a higher risk of abusing their loved ones as they reach adulthood. As we discussed, even the bystanders have negative outcomes that they're at risk for. Some of these things that just the kids who are bystanders to these events, they're putting themselves at risk of having increased tobacco, drug, and alcohol use, increased mental health issues, and they may miss or skip school more than their peers. Now, a lot of this information can be found from the U.S. Department of Health and Wellness. That's where a lot of this information comes from, so if you want some more information about that, you can look into that. Now, I hope that this gives you a better understanding of how to identify if a child is being involved in a bullying incident. I also hope that it proves that bullying, to any skeptics, that bullying is not only serious in a minute number of cases. It's serious all the time. As you can see from the negative outcomes that these kids are at risk for, bullying behavior is not just something we can chalk up to as a phase, and it definitely is something that we need to address sooner rather than later. So I hope you enjoyed your time today. Our next webinar next week is going to talk about strategies that we can use after we have identified that bullying is happening in our communities. Until then, I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.